Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scott Hagnes. This is the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
Good. Busy, but good. Good.
Nice, man. I'm running
Yeah.
around as well, and we able to squeeze this in between a couple sessions, I think, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Perfect. So this week, I'm making a concerted effort to carve out the time that I need to get my new training program going, and I'm going to be following the Pierre's Elite Performance basically template of I believe it's 3 4 week blocks, eccentric, isometric, and then like speed, strength, explosive work
Right.
in
Trifecta.
three separate 4 week blocks, and each week is 3 workouts. Um, the first workout of the week is like everything's usually 4 sets of 4 as the main lift. So, like, say squats, your main lift. You have
Hmm.
a squat workout on Monday and Wednesday and Friday. The first workout of the week is that um, moderate to moderate intensity, like 4x4s, and then
Hmm.
it's combined with the French method. The
Okay.
the
Gotcha.
Wednesday workout is cluster training, so we're working at 90% plus for those. 4 sets of 3 on a 1.1.1. A little less accessory work, so not quite a French method there because they want emphasis on the heavy lift. And then the final one is a higher volume day, lower percentages, but a higher volume day. Similar to Monday, just a little bit more volume.
Hmm.
Uh, the handbook has some great dynamic and mobility warm ups and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be integrating some of the stuff that Zach Couples kind of gave us, and as well as things that I've worked on my own as well, and that we've worked on as well. So maybe even implementing cars type things in like a French method type way. So you have your main lift, then you have your speed movement, and then maybe a cars, and then maybe like a core movement, and then you cycle through that for 4 sets.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
So that would be the first training block that I'm going to be doing. So 3 days a week, and then hopefully what I'm going to be able to do is on those opposite days is get some general conditioning in. So usually run is good for me just because I can just throw my shoes on and get going. So I'll
Hmm.
probably do one day of intervals, start off with a 10-minute go and then like 3 minutes hard, 3 minutes easy, and then do those for multiple building sets over weeks. In addition to one longer, slower one where I'm building from like 35 minutes to probably an hour over multiple blocks.
Nice. That sounds pretty solid.
So, looking to kind of get structurally balanced first
Hmm.
and then hit some more specific goals after this little 12-week training block. So, I'm thinking probably by spring, that's where I like write it down on paper. It's like, this is what I want to do now
Hmm.
that I have some kind of base layer of strength. And I've never really given an opportunity to the speed strength stuff that this stuff is going to be implementing as well, like the jumping and the
Yeah.
plyometrics and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That'll be definitely kind of neat. Outside of light, minimal touches, probably pretty.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of that frontal plane and transverse plane, that things that we talked about last time, right, Scott?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Um, is that in there as far as a lot of like accessory type stuff, or are you
Definitely,
implementing that?
definitely. And whether they're in the warm up, like specific, so there's like mobility, like 3 different things in the warm up for each. For any workout, they do like what's called a multi-directional warm up. In the
Hmm.
multi-directional warm up, he has agility, mobility, and then dynamic flexibility. You're
Hmm.
supposed to like choose a few exercises. It should take you about 10 minutes. And then on the workouts themselves, they have like prep work. So like things like pal off presses or wall presses or like ankle stability stuff, and then the workout. So realistically, these workouts are designed to be like 90 minutes long.
Hmm.
But I'm going to try to condense it down just a little bit without bastardizing it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. What are your thoughts, Scott?
I mean, that sounds pretty solid. I mean, it sounds similar to what I'm doing in some ways too.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that approach, kind of building, getting a lot of that transverse and frontal plane stuff, but with some really big heavy lifts in there still. Keep that solid base of strength and anabolism, and
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, conditioning sounds pretty solid. Yeah, be curious. How does the so it goes? You said 12 weeks. So does the evolve in kind of a traditional accumulation to intensification kind of thing, or how does it change over the? How are you
From
progressing it
week to
over the
week, it is
12? Yeah.
progressing in percentages, and then you can obviously increase the difficulty of the accessory lifts by
Mm,
increasing just the weight.
yeah. Cool.
But yeah, yeah, just increases in weight using intensity of using the increases of weight.
Mm, cool.
So
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm kind of getting mine together here as well. I ran into some hiccups last week. I didn't get as much planning as I had planned, but I'm doing. I have some mobility and lingering injuries from my last season, I guess, if you will, of riding
hmm
my bike. I'm trying to work on, and so I'm going to do a bunch of kind of a 20-minute kind of stability circuit, kind of full body,
hmm
lighter movements, things like bottoms up presses and, precise versions of split squats and some cable stuff, some rotational type work, etc.
Yep.
And then move into like one heavy lift per day
Mm.
after that, and then some kind of more typical accessory work, which will be partly, sort of standard accessory lifts like, say, single leg, RDL,
hmm
with a bit of frontal plane emphasis, but paired with then either cars or isometric work for my uh, things I'm working on, shoulder, knee stuff, shoulder, knee,
hmm
ankle stability work as well. So.
It's interesting that one of the areas that I um have always wanted to work on is my like being able to grab a hoop, 10-foot hoop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I might as well get that done now before I'm too old to jump anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to try and hit that window when it's still open somewhat. Yeah.
I know. I
Yeah.
know. And the other thing that I was going to hit on was the fact that when you train, it's always important to, and this is something that I've learned over time, it's always important to understand what you're trying to accomplish during the training session, especially if we're doing something like weight training, and kind of to know what your base is and your philosophy is. And for me in particular, one of the things that I've continued to go back to over and over and over again over time is the idea that we're trying to be able to maintain whatever position, whatever weight, whatever movement while maintaining rib cage position um, and producing force while producing force, right? So
Cooperative force, right.
if I am doing an exercise where I'm trying to go heavier than where I was last week, or trying to increase the number of sets from last week, but I'm starting to deteriorate in terms of my positioning and I'm starting to feel my back flare up, whatever, it's having that knowing and being like, you know what, I'm cutting it. Or I'm
Mm-hmm.
regressing it to a point where I can actually train what it is that I'm trying to train. Like
Right.
if you're not going to do that, you're just going to keep spinning your wheels. So let's just use an example for myself personally, how I really have never been able to get consistent good pistols. I mean, they're there, and especially if I warm up. But today I was doing them to a box, and I was just like, you know what? Like instead of rushing through these, and instead of doing 8 of these, let me do 3 of these consecutively with perfect technique, and then I'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I found when I did that, again, when it's a high neuromuscular movement relative to the athlete, you can't do 8 reps.
Right.
So a pistol
Yeah.
for me is like a max effort in terms of using my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some people, like a snatch is a max effort. And that's fine. This is the same reason why you're not doing sets of 10 in the snatch, unless you're going for a metabolic stimulus and you don't care necessarily as much about positions. But
Mm-hmm.
like usually those golden ranges are like what, 2 to 5 reps when we're working on regrooving things. And there's a reason for that, because after a certain point, you just basically your brain loses the ability to focus on all the components necessary to execute the movement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Your muscles might be, in theory, okay. The brain also has a limit that it's reached as you go deeper into sets. So yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. Have you had the same experience, Scott?
Yeah, for sure. Like if I'm really focusing on quality, I can't do that many reps. At some point, your brain either checks out or you may be attempting to hold everything together and you realize, oh, I forgot about this and this, Well, that's your brain got too tired to handle all the variables, I guess it needed, some time to reset. So I typically, people learning a new movement, repatterning a new movement, it's always rather low rep, even if the weight isn't that significant, but there's just a lot to focus on. I'd rather do a lot of shorter sets and get in more
Yes.
quality work.
Yes, and that gives an opportunity also to even to do clusters if you want to increase volume while having
Hmm.
more neuromuscularly dense exercises in there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where the kind of repetition clusters, you could do a set of 3, a short rest, enough to let your brain back re-engage, get 3 more, do
Mm,
that 3 times, then take a longer break. If I'm working with someone, then now we're going to use this longer break to kind of, you know, check in and, touch on things. And then
yep.
that way we did 6, or I guess that would be 9 reps, but in little mini sets of 3.
And if you want to do hypertrophy work, make the movement much more regressed so that you can actually get the stimulus that you want and you're not ingraining poor technique. So, for instance, instead of doing hypertrophy work in the form of single leg squats, let's say for a individual like myself of like sets of 8 to 12, I might do single leg hip thrust off a bench where I can actually get some good repetitions, get some good time under tension, and I'm going to be able to keep the tension in that set rather than doing one pistol, having to stop, reset my position, and then I'm really not getting the time under tension necessary to elicit the response.
Right. Yeah, there's no reason why not to use simpler movements with hypertrophy is the main goal.
Yeah,
Yeah, something that is neurologically well ingrained, and you're not, you can put more thought into the effort than necessarily the technique because it's regressed enough where it's fairly automatic.
exactly. And I think that can go with things like warm ups. That can go things like skill work. Uh, like I think one of the things that I picked up from you, especially, is when you're doing your things in your gymnastics progressions, is really not pushing the either length of the set, but doing more sets themselves,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Because if you're training the nervous system and you're training higher threshold motor control, whereas you might have some hypertrophy work in there, but it's probably done toward the end of the workout and it's done with very simple movements. Like you're like, okay, I need a multi-joint movement to increase my biceps. I might do curls. I don't
yeah,
have to do ring pull-ups to get that,
right.
or like lever negatives or something like that to get that kind of pump. I could just do it with dumbbells. So I think that's in especially in the occasion of gymnastics. I think that's a very great way, push-ups, ring rows,
Hmm.
just dumbbell work to get your hypertrophy work in.
Yeah, use the actual gymnastic movements as max effort strength work or
Yep.
skill, et cetera, depending on the movement. Either way, it has a large neurological demand to it, and we're not going to be using it for hypertrophy in that sense. And just some of those workouts, just by their nature, have to take a while to accumulate enough repetition,
Yep.
depending on the skill.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. It's
yeah.
just
Clusters work great there too. Same
yes.
concept.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a different experience from those who are used to doing a 30-minute AMRAP or some kind of like intervals. It's like, no, that's not how you really train higher motor control. You can't do that under that much fatigue or with that much if you want um, if you want higher level movements. So
Right.
if you're, because there's always these athletes, especially the ones that I get to, they want to do kipping pull ups in a workout when they haven't really shown that they can do kipping pull ups not under fatigue. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what is the point of the actual conditioning? It's conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is the basis of this whole thing, right? So if you're not getting a conditioning stimulus, let's say this stimulus should be aerobic power mixed modally. If you're not getting that, then don't even think about doing those kipping pull-ups, let's say, or butterflies
Right.
or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it simple, stupid. And
Yeah.
if you want to get better at those things, it's not during the Metcon. It's during your skill work. It's during part A and part B, not during your conditioning.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
if I could drill one thing into my clients' heads and anybody who's out there who's listening to this, stop doing difficult shit in your workouts. Right, Scott?
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep it for the skill work. Earn your way to being able to eventually do them in the conditioning sets.
That's what I wanted to hear. Earn that difficulty. It's much
Hmm.
easier for us to just say, I'm gonna, slug my way through this, but you're gonna see that over time, your progress is gonna be so limited.
Yeah. And
And I know
it's
from
where people
experience.
stall all the time. Yeah. I totally same thing. Early years, I certainly rushed to try to do everything to look like it was supposed to, RX weights and RX movements, even when I
Mm-hmm.
really shouldn't have been doing that, and slug my way through it. And, we have this thought, I think we all do go through this, where as long as it sucks and we're trying as hard as we can, it must be doing us some good. But it's a great way to plateau well below your potential. That's for
Mm-hmm.
sure. You know, yep.
Exactly.
Do practice it, make it great and fairly effortless in skill work, and then begin putting it into conditioning circuits, but in lower, manageable doses, and then on a progression, increase it over time as your ability to do it grows.
And that's my philosophy in general with training athletes in the sport of fitness. I guess I'm biased based upon what my own journey has led me to. But if I were to do it all over again, I would have said, okay, I mean, honestly, I had to probably have done it this way because there's no way I would have stuck with it. If someone said, hey, it's going to take you 5 years if you just work on skill work, and then you might have a chance of doing it, like I would be like, I don't know about that. But I think if I were to have emphasized not going too far within my conditioning pieces and the weights that I'm training, and I train more of the movement itself, yada yada yada, I think I probably would have gotten to a point, um, where I would have been much further ahead without the time involved, right? So I probably would have
Mm-hmm.
gotten 5 years instead of 9 years to where I am, right? That
Yeah.
being said, as a coach, there's no other thing I would have wanted because I have the experiential knowledge now, and I think you have the same thing of saying, okay, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. What do you want me to tell you about that will convince you that what you're doing is either the correct thing or the incorrect thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to learn, and we both were self-selected guinea pigs in this whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? Starting out fairly early when the practices were pretty rudimentary, and of course they're still not what they're going to be, but um, just the time frame that we got started with it. It
Yep.
was basically just dive in and try to figure it out, and nobody knew.
Yeah.
And even the people that were coming along with what seemed to be forward-thinking ideas, now we see that some of that was incorrect, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's evolving all the time. So it gives us a pretty good background to know, you know, how stuff should feel and shouldn't feel, and made the mistakes and so forth.
I'm compelled to do 30 days eating vegan.
Ah, interesting.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I've I'm on the fence with this. I want like someone who could potentially help me in that process of eating vegan for 30 days or maybe even
Mm-hmm.
vegetarian or something like
Uh-huh.
that. Um, because I want the knowledge and I want the experience to be able to sit down with people who are non-meat eaters
Mm-hmm.
and see them from their perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and go through the process.
Yeah, that would be interesting, and it wouldn't even be bad for your system to do a little bit of a short but not super short term, deload from certain things you have done for a long time and
Yeah.
expose to other things.
And I suppose in me saying that, there's a part of me that also is scared that I might have been wrong.
Anymore after having been, done so many 180s on like my various nutritional
Yeah.
practices. I've learned to not poo-poo anything anymore. You know?
I know. And another thing for me is I'm scared of not eating enough. I'm scared of losing muscle mass. There's so
Yeah.
many fears connected to it that I think it compels me to even more look into it and actually do it.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. So in my little world of BMX flatland riders, veganism is fairly popular. And
Hmm.
there's a number of good and well-known riders that have been vegan for many, many years. And so, having been on the trip, last week, and um, you look at these guys, and a lot of them are in their 40s now, and I mean they are still in quite good shape. And it's really a collection of people that do not look their age by any stretch of the imagination, vegan or vegetarian or not,
Yep.
honestly. But um, you're like, well, these guys still seem pretty healthy, and they've done this. Not saying I'm going to jump the bandwagon over there, but it's like,
Yeah.
you um, can't poo-poo it like it's the worst idea ever. Just um, so I don't know.
Yeah. And I would love to know, like, because obviously we know so much about the way the gut works and gut irritants and that kind of stuff. And if you were to just say, because I remember you telling a story of how you're like, all right, I'm going to go vegan for whatever
It was
you did.
vegetarian at
Yeah,
that point.
vegetarian.
Yeah,
You did it for a little while, but you just ate shit the entire time, and you were like, I feel like
exactly.
crap. But
Yep.
maybe that's the point. Maybe it's that it really doesn't matter as much about what you eat. It matters about eating things that A are probably best suited for you, and B just eating things that are non-processed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't doubt. Um, I mean, that was surely just because I ate garbage. I had no idea this was, you know, for those that didn't hear the original when we discussed this. This was back before I got into training, before I got into coaching, or was even interested in nutrition at all. I just decided to do it, and I basically ended up having to eat just pure garbage to avoid um, any
Yep.
sort of meat and cheese products,
Yep.
and because I wasn't at this time in my life, I wasn't cooking, I wasn't fixing, I had no knowledge of any of that stuff. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, if I were to do it now, I would be doing much much differently.
Yeah. So I'm going to look into that. I mean, there's something that there's a calling inside me that might want to do it, and I think it's great to maybe even build some content and to be able to bridge the gap between the two sides. Like if there's no
Yeah,
other time that we can actually talk to each other than when I actually have the perspective of the other person's side of this. So if I want to be able to convert people, I got to know what the way they think. I got to kind of walk the walk a little bit. I can't just say, well, this is this. Not to mention that I had a conversation with somebody who was a vegan the other day, and believe it or not, most of the things that we talk about and that they are proponents of, I'm proponents of as well. Like they're like I'm not. They're like I'm against the mass farming and agriculture. I'm like I am too. They're like okay, well I don't like pesticides. I'm like I don't like those either. And they're like I don't like the fact that animals are pumped full of hormones and antibiotics. I'm like I never said I was either. Like why do
yeah,
those two things have to be mutually exclusive? Treating animals humanely but still eating meat.
right. Yep.
And I think that's people, a lot of people will die on that hill because they don't want to, it punches holes into the story.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, and as we've talked about before, also, it's dietary practice has become almost religious or political in
Yeah.
nature, right?
Yeah.
And but being able to at least kind of be able to negotiate both and be a bit of a centrist with it. So I don't think any of the extreme approaches. I don't care, vegan, paleo, super low carb, super low fat, yada, whatever. It's super fasting. I don't think there's evidence to support that any of them are superior.
Yep.
Some people will do better with different versions of those than others. We know this, but none of them is the magic bullet. In spite of what people on all sides seem to think.
Yeah. And I think, um, in general, if you find something that seems like a magic bullet, we just don't know enough about it yet.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
like,
Yep. We haven't looked at the potential downsides. We're only looking at the ways it might give us benefits and haven't assessed.
exactly. Exactly. So let's
Yeah.
just give an easy example is like, remember the whole paleo movement back in the early 2000s. So you had tons of people eating meats, nuts, seeds, basically a very little amount of carbs and lots of vegetables. And you're like, all right, this is a great diet. And then you see that what they're also doing is high intensity metabolic training. They're probably under eating. And then you see people after 2 or 3 months of doing it, they get minimal progress or they're actually starting to regress.
Yeah.
So very
Yeah, and
easy.
then all kinds of hormone imbalances from doing that.
Exactly.
That would have been lessened had they at least eaten some carbohydrate to go with their training.
Mm-hmm.
And it was blamed on all kinds of other things initially because they didn't see the pattern that it was actually the whole what was going on. That was the way they were eating was leading to these problems.
Yes. So, and then we could say the same thing about, let's say, veganism. It's like, okay, you're going to take out all your processed foods. You're going to eat vegetables. You're going to eat, protein rich, vegetables and vegetation. And you're going to hit that. And for a lot of people, like, holy shit, this is great. Like I'm feeling awesome. And then after 3 months of it, they start maybe, again, seeing, wait a second, I'm not seeing as much progress. I'm actually maybe getting a little bit worse. My sleep is worse. My hormonal balance might be imbalanced because now all I've been doing is eating, soy-based products for my proteins, and I'm starting to aromatize things, right? Or aromatize my hormones. And again, there's all these little nuances, and there's all these mechanisms that we don't fully understand. And for some people, they mean a lot more than others. And it's not until we actually take a step back or until we actually experience those things that we can make an assessment of what is best for us objectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
So I'm still on the fence, Scott. I got to get some more information, but I'm getting close to pulling the trigger. I just don't want to put more stress in my life right now. That would just lead to my whole house of cards falling down.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure you understand how to do it. Like if I were to just suddenly just like, I'm going to do this with you tomorrow, having not looked into it, I'm not actually sure how I would feed myself.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I can obviously eat vegetables and, some grain-based stuff, whatever, but I would have to figure out how I'm getting protein, how I'm avoiding, because I'm not going to eat a lot of, I'm not going to go soy products. So what would I do,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of education on how to do it well.
Yep. And then that's the case where we need to see mentors. So the only way that I'm going to get this is if someone is more advanced than I am, like knows more than me. And a lot of the time we seek the advice of people who know as much or less than us because we want confirmation bias. We don't want an answer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If we really want an answer, we would get the person who's going to tell us exactly what to do. But a lot of the times we don't really want that. We just want someone to tell us that what we're doing is the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking for the person who is willing to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear.
Yeah. Quick side note, speaking, as we talked about our upcoming training cycles. So the other thing I decided to do over this last week was it's never really before been an option, but in my sport of freestyle BMX, the guy I would consider to be basically Michael Jordan. He's now semi-retired, but he's probably the most creative and just did the hardest stuff anyone's ever done. And he's offering online coaching. I know he's been coaching a couple pros, but he's opened it up a little bit. And I decided that I'm going to outsource my riding a little bit because I was planning to really fill in a lot of basics that I missed along the way.
Yeah.
And so, and I know just from having my own coach in the gym before, there's certainly things he had me do I would never have put myself through, and things that I couldn't see, as it's difficult to be your own coach.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure I will have to do things that are a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, man, that's great. Way to get outside your comfort zone, Scott. I like that.
Yeah. So I figure that's a way to grow and learn. Yeah.
We've always learned by doing. Okay, well, Scotty, if we want to get you, how can we reach out to you, Scott?
I am Scott at CrossFitPortland.com. You can send me an email there.
Okay, and I am Sean LaFlock. You can give me at Sean at CrossFitDurryBeach.com. Scott, you got anything else for today?
No, that'll about do it. I
All
got a
right.
full slate, and it sounds like you do too. So
Yeah, man. Starting lacrosse
onward.
today. So remember, guys,
Yeah.
if you like this podcast, please subscribe, review it, give it 5 stars, and that will make it easier for people to find it and to spread the word. Scott, I will talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week, brother. Good luck with lacrosse, and
Thanks, man. Take care.
take care.